Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we dive into one of the most gripping and controversial developments of recent times. The fate of the Sumud Flotilla activists, now hanging in the balance as Israel weighs its next move. The question on everyone's mind is simple, yet heavy with consequences. Who goes home, and who does not? The Sumud Flotilla was not an ordinary fleet. It carried more than humanitarian supplies. It carried symbolism, defiance, and a call for justice. Activists, journalists, doctors, and human rights defenders from across the globe gathered on board, sailing toward Gaza in a direct challenge to the blockade imposed by Israel for over 17 years. Their mission was clear: break the siege, bring medical aid, and draw global attention to what they describe as collective punishment of millions of Palestinians. But what started as a voyage of solidarity ended abruptly when Israeli naval forces intercepted the flotilla in international waters. Armed patrol boats surrounded the ships, warning the activists to halt. When they refused, commandos boarded, detaining the passengers and towing the vessels to Ashdod port. The images that followed were splashed across screens worldwide. Activists with their hands zip-tied, medical cargo confiscated, banners torn down, and chants silenced. Now, days after the interception, Israel faces a dilemma. The activists are not armed militants, nor are they common criminals. They are citizens of dozens of nations from the United States, Canada, Spain, Turkey, South Africa, and beyond. Some are elderly peace campaigners, others are university students, and still others are seasoned humanitarian workers. Governments around the world are pressuring Israel to release their nationals immediately. Human rights organizations are demanding that Israel respect international law. And ordinary people are flooding social media with the question, what will happen to them? Inside Israel, the debate is fierce. Hardline politicians argue that the flotilla was an act of provocation orchestrated to embarrass Israel and aid Hamas. They claim that allowing such voyages to succeed would open the floodgates, weakening the naval blockade that Israel insists is necessary to prevent weapons smuggling. In their view, keeping the activists detained, prosecuting some under Israeli law, and deporting others with bans on reentry is the only way to maintain deterrence. But moderates inside Israel, along with segments of the defense establishment, warn that harsh punishment could backfire. Images of activists languishing in detention risk turning them into martyrs and fueling a global backlash. The last thing Israel wants, they argue, is another international crisis like the 2010 Mavi Marmara incident, where a flotilla raid left 9 Turkish activists dead and triggered years of diplomatic isolation. Instead, they propose a more calibrated approach: screen the activists, quietly deport most of them, and minimize the drama. Meanwhile, in Gaza, anticipation and anger run high. Families of the sick and wounded, who had hoped for desperately needed medical supplies, feel yet another promise has been crushed. Activists who remain free vow to send more flotillas, insisting that every interception only exposes Israel's siege more vividly to the world. You can detain us, but you cannot detain the truth, one activist declared before being taken into custody. His words are now echoing across protest rallies in London, Johannesburg, and Kuala Lumpur. International reactions are pouring in. The European Union has demanded clarity on the detainees' conditions and called for their swift release. The Turkish government has summoned the Israeli ambassador, warning that continued detentions could strain ties further. South African officials described the arrests of their citizens as an assault on humanitarian principles. Even within the United Nations, a growing chorus of diplomats is pressing for an impartial investigation into Israel's actions at sea. But Israel remains defiant. Officials stress that the activists knowingly violated the blockade, which Israel considers legal under international maritime law. They argue that humanitarian aid can enter Gaza through official border crossings, though critics counter that these crossings are tightly controlled and subject to frequent closures. For Israel, the flotilla is less about aid and more about narrative warfare. Who controls the global story and who is painted as aggressor or victim? Inside detention centers, the activists face uncertain futures. Some have begun hunger strikes, refusing food until they are released. Lawyers representing them complain of limited access, claiming that interrogations have focused not only on the flotilla, but also on their political views. For families waiting back home, each passing hour feels unbearable. Mothers cry on television, pleading for their sons and daughters to be sent back. Campaigns flood embassies with calls and petitions, demanding answers. The Israeli cabinet is now split. Intelligence officials push for swift deportation, warning that prolonged detention will draw more protests. Security hawks argue the opposite, insisting that leniency will embolden activists to launch bigger flotillas next time. The Prime Minister faces a delicate balancing act. Release them too quickly, and critics at home accuse him of weakness. Hold them too long, and Israel risks alienating allies abroad. This is where the story becomes not just about ships and activists, but about power, diplomacy, and perception. Each activist represents a nation, a constituency, a network of supporters. By deciding their fate, Israel is not merely making a legal judgment. It is sending a message to the world. Will it project strength, or will it invite condemnation? Will it silence the story, or amplify it? On the ground, activist families and supporters organize rallies. In Madrid, thousands march with banners reading "Free the Flotilla." In Cape Town, church leaders hold vigils for the detained South African activists. In New York, student groups stage sit-ins outside consulates. Across continents, the message is clear. The fate of these activists is not just Israel's business, but the world's concern. Back in Israel, the media covers the drama daily. Some newspapers publish profiles of the activists, painting them as well-intentioned but naive. Others brand them as extremists in disguise, linked to groups hostile to Israel. Talk shows debate whether deportation is too soft or whether the world is ganging up unfairly on Israel once again. It is a storm not only in international waters, but in Israel's domestic politics too. The coming days will be decisive. Reports suggest Israel may deport the majority of activists within the week, while reserving the right to prosecute a few leaders accused of orchestrating the flotilla. If true, this would be a compromise, an attempt to diffuse international anger without appearing to surrender. But whether such a move will calm the outrage remains uncertain. For the activists themselves, the journey is already etched in history. They set sail knowing the risks, prepared to face arrest, and determined to highlight what they view as a moral struggle. Their mission, they argue, was never only about the supplies they carried, but about challenging the blockade itself. And in that sense, they may already consider themselves victorious. Every newspaper headline, every TV report, every trending hashtag ensures their story is told. Yet the bigger question looms, what about Gaza? While the world debates the activist fate, 2 million people remain trapped under blockade. Hospitals still face shortages. Students still struggle to travel abroad. Families still rebuild after repeated bombardments. The flotilla may have been intercepted, but the humanitarian crisis it sought to expose continues unabated. And so we circle back to the question, who goes home? In a literal sense, Israel will decide which activists board planes and return to their families. But in a deeper sense, the question extends to Gaza itself. When will its people go home to a life free of siege, free of occupation, free of uncertainty? That is the question no flotilla, no interception, no detention can fully answer. It is a question that hangs heavy over the region, waiting for justice, waiting for peace. As this story develops, the eyes of the world remain fixed on Israel's decision. For the activists, the wait is agonizing. For their families, it is unbearable. For Gaza, it is yet another reminder of promises unfulfilled. And for us, the observers, it is a test of conscience, a test of how far humanity is willing to go to challenge injustice, and how much power is willing to bend before the truth.